the biggest issue a lot of times with warehouse operations is they're just overstuffed. When we start having to stock material in aisles, their warehouse was so incredibly packed that they may or may not have had a bathroom out in the warehouse. It was kind of overflow storage at times. I've never seen a warehouse so stuffed before in my life. I don't know how they found anything.
You're listening to Supply Chain Unlocked. Get exclusive insights from industry leaders on overcoming challenges.
I have Matt with EIM with us today. The real angle is human intelligence. Matt came on to by name of James Marley, who I worked with in the past and is part founder of this podcast. Big piece that I saw about EIM was how they embrace human intelligence and inventory. And that was my big key. So I'm going to jump to Matt. Go ahead and pronounce your last name. We joked a little bit pre-podcast because I knew I was going to jack it up.
It's Schreibfeder.
Schreibfeder. Excellent.
Yeah, anything close is far better than what I've heard. So I'm like a dog. I respond to anything close in the right number of syllables, just like my dog does. So it works.
Go. Tell us a little about yourself, EIM, and how you got here.
Okay. So Effective Inventory Management was founded by my father, John, in 1996. We actually just had our 30-year anniversary last week. We help our clients get the most out of their inventory investment. We don't sell software. We help find customized solutions to very specific problems, general problems, issues that we're having, and things like that. Personally, I've been with John for about 5.5 years now. Prior to that, straight out of college, I was driving submarines around in the ocean. Thanks to everybody for paying me to do that. It was a lot of fun. Then I worked for ExxonMobil as a cost and schedule engineer, essentially a bean counter to make sure we stayed on time and on budget as much as humanly possible on big upgrades.
I'm just going to digress for a second, if you don't mind. Tell us more about your time in the Navy. I know it's not that applicable, but everybody wants to hear that military interest story. And when you just said submarines, I knew Navy. What about the submarine part of it? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it was a whole lot of fun. The most important parts and most fun parts I can't talk about, unfortunately. But something that I learned quite a bit in there was, very complex systems, very complex procedures and everything like that. But it all boils down to the people you have. And just like businesses you have right now, you have a certain bench to pull from. You have to maximize strengths of the people you have, build true systems, processes, and procedures, because if you're relying on the talent of specific individuals, eventually they're going to leave, either retire, move on to a new position, or in the Navy's standpoint, people get transferred all the time. So building a true system where everybody's doing things the right way, however we define right, is important, but truly building to something that can withstand, personnel transitions.
Quick ask to our audience, give us a subscribe so you can get future videos as well as comment in the comment section below. Thank you. Now back to the video. I got you. I'm going to jump to the book. We didn't pre-podcast on this, but I did realize it a little bit later. You co-authored a 7th edition of your book with your father. That's a multi-generational knowledge transfer with the family business. The reason I'm getting into that is to sort of walk people into the situation and why you think the way you think, and also just how the business has evolved.
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun writing the book with John. He's written 6 versions of it before I came on board. So a lot of it was really making updates, new strategies, new ways of dealing with the advancements that we've seen in the last 5 or 6 years, which has been groundbreaking in a lot of cases. It used to be the biggest problem was just finding data. Now it's trying to limit data that we're getting, because it's so easy to generate so much data with the click of a button or a quick search or anything like that. But actually pulling true information out of it has become probably the biggest new challenge that we're seeing.
That's a really good point. Comes from my background being in IT. So often we do have just mountains of data, and all it does is confuse people. And we'll get to it later. You try to extrapolate or summarize something like that out of the data, and you really don't know where to break it up and run the teams and go in a certain direction. And I think that's where we're going to get into the human intelligence part of this conversation, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's in the difference between, data is numbers, bits of, small pieces of facts and stuff like that. Information is something you can make a decision on.
So go ahead and plug the book. And again, I apologize to let a little bit more with this.
So it's Achieving Effective Inventory Management. We're now releasing the 7th edition, and it is a general just theory of how we look at managing inventory, both for planning it, how to properly stock a warehouse to minimize the cost of filling orders. There are a lot of different ways of accomplishing both of those. We have our opinions, but a lot of it does boil down to what works for you, and what works for one company might not work for another one. Something that EIM is truly passionate about, and we stress this quite a bit in the book, is understanding the true cost of maintaining and managing inventory. It's way more than just what you paid for it, because we have to move it around, count it, potentially gets lost, and all those kinds of factors. And if we're only using the gross margin for trying to make decisions on it, we might be being very penny smart, but very dollar stupid, where, yeah, we're making a killing on the gross margin, but unfortunately we're so terribly overstocked, we're drowning in inventory, and we're seeing that quite often.
I got you. When you walk into a distributor or a manufacturer and audit their inventory, do you have personally defined operational excellence? In other words, what does good look like on the warehouse floor and not in a PowerPoint?
So there's two different aspects. Good on the warehouse floor is, a properly functioning warehouse is a happy one, generally, and it starts very basically. Proper signage, proper lighting, things getting put away where it belongs. It sounds very simple. I refer to them as like, thank you, doctor, pieces of advice. You go to the doctor, he says you need to eat right, exercise, and get enough sleep. It's like, oh, thanks, I didn't know that. So that's where it has to start, and it's shocking how often a warehouse is kind of overlooked in terms of any kind of upgrades or any kind of optimization, where it's just the way it is. And poor signage, poor lighting, just generally a not pleasant place to work in. John and I are walking through an unheated warehouse in like Chicago in January, and the owner was saying, I don't know why I can't get people to work here. And we're like, are you serious? It's terrible. So warehouses, every single one of them is incredibly unique. They all have different challenges and stuff like that, but making sure that everybody understands how it's operating well, taking good care of employees. The other side of it, the planning side, and EIM does both. Planning is determining and helping decide what shows up in the warehouse, and that there are some general guidelines that we live by, but there aren't a whole lot of definite rules. And our definition of excellence, I think, as you put it, is everything that shows up in a warehouse should be there for a reason. So things showing up and nobody exactly knows why, anybody can buy anything at any time in any quantity, can kind of lead to inventory anarchy, as we refer to it, where a salesperson needs 5 of something, they get a better deal if they order 30. Make a great deal on the 5, 25 of them are going to be there forever. That's where we want to try and help determine what does need to be in the warehouse. Very subjective decision. Some of my clients will say that they want to stock anything they've ever sold in the last 2 years. Other ones will say that they're not willing to stock anything that doesn't turn 4 or 5 times a year. And there's everything in between. So a lot of times, excellence boils down to, how do you want to operate? What level of customer service do you want to provide to your customers? How much are you willing to invest in inventory? A lot of times, those kind of counteract each other. Better customer service, more inventory. Unfortunately, that means more expense.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like a snap your fingers engagement, like you're going to come in and say, buy this software or use this spreadsheet. The relationship's got to evolve for you to better understand the situation, to develop a strategy and then execute on it, right?
Very much so. The reason we're brought in a lot of times is because someone has been sold a system that they've been told. It's like, snap your fingers, back orders are going to be a thing of the past. That doesn't generally work too well. Or if it does, you're drowning in inventory to do it. So there is always going to be that subjective, personal decision on how we want to. I strongly recommend make sure that whatever your system is doing, you understand and you agree with. It's not going to be, I've yet to see any system that you can just flip a flight switch on and go. Now, all your problems are solved. Everything else is taken care of. Automatic means it just happens. It doesn't mean that it's right.
You've worked for over 3,000 organizations through EIM. What percentage of them are actually doing inventory well when you first show up?
I mean, most everybody that we talk to is is successful in one way or another. If they weren't, they wouldn't be in business anymore. So we generally take the attitude when we're talking with someone that, okay, let's see what you're doing. What's working well? What are the pain points? And really trying to focus on the pain points to how do we take what you're doing and make it a little bit better is generally how we get started. There are very few situations that we walk into and go, this is a complete disaster. I can think of maybe one or two off the top of my head, and both of them happen to be government organizations where the bottom line doesn't matter so much. So not many of them are huge issues. A lot of times it's, hey, this is working, but we're constantly having stockouts in our most popular items. How do we fix that? And we might need to come up with new strategies, looking at different pieces of data, understanding what they're doing right now, what we could potentially do a little bit more efficiently in the future.
Gotcha. Let's transition over to inventory crisis. In a lot of ways, it's tariffs, chaos. And honestly, this is what people have trouble comprehending as I interview more and more people. It's the cost of inaction and the continuous cost of inaction. It's very difficult to explain or wrap somebody's head around. So here's my question. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. We're sitting here 2026. Tariffs are shifting by the week, if not by the hour. The Supreme Court just struck down EPA tariffs in February, and companies are sitting on mountains of inventory they front-loaded before rate hikes. What are you seeing out there right now?
A lot of panic or a lot of uncertainty. And it's a very difficult question to answer. So you mentioned the cost of inaction, I believe how you put it. Now, there's also a cost associated with emergent reaction, knee-jerk reactions to things. So tariff specifically, it almost kind of pulls us in two completely separate directions a lot of times. On the one hand, we want to get ahead of it. I want to bring the material in now while it's cheaper and take advantage of the cost difference out in the future. But at the same time, I might need to increase my prices eventually, and now I'm overstocked on material. Or the tariff might not happen, or the tariff might drop down. Now all I've essentially done is give my vendors a loan for bringing in material way too early. If we do actually see tariff hikes, we also see things getting pulled in two different directions. One, more expensive material generally means we want to have less in the warehouse. But at the same time, tariffs also lead to, or at least people believe there's going to be a scarcity. So we might want to have more material to take care of our clients. So a lot of times stocking up might be the right decision, right idea. We just want to make sure it's an informed one, not just, I heard there's going to be a tariff, go buy a bunch. Too often we see organizations jump at bringing in more material when they're already overstocked on it. So now we were sitting on 9 months of material. Now we're sitting on 18 months of material, but we got ahead of the tariff. We're giving away a lot of that margin while we're just having the material sit out in the warehouse and collect dust for a longer period of time. So it's a double-edged sword in a lot of cases. And we just want to make sure that it's informed decisions.
You know what I see often is, we saved on that margin. We got great purchasing people. And we're also looking for more space over across the street in another warehouse.
That's the other thing. John, our founder, he has a lot of sayings and idioms that he's come up with. And one of them is buyers believe that warehouse walls are elastic. Well, they're not. We do have to figure out where stuff is going to be. And the biggest issue a lot of times with warehouse operations is they're just overstuffed. When we start having to stock material in aisles, we were with one and their warehouse was so incredibly packed that they may or may not have had a bathroom out in the warehouse, depending if they just got a shipment or not. It was kind of overflow storage at times. I've never seen a warehouse so stuffed before in my life. I don't know how they found anything. And that was actually a big problem of theirs. Anytime we're stocking up material, special orders and stuff like that, let the warehouse manager at least know about it. Because showing up at 6 a.m. on a Monday morning to 2 truckloads that you weren't expecting to be there is not a great way to start the week.
Yeah, true. Ask this question that it's very tough to answer, but maybe there's a stark thing hanging out there. What's the number one mistake you're seeing companies make right now in response to the tariffs? Because we've talked about both sides of that, right? The emergent side, and what's like just the big one that seems to be always there?
So the panic purchasing is probably the biggest one, but along with that, understanding how additional tariffs may or may not affect profitability. It is an additional expense, whether or not we itemize it or just use it as a bottom line, subjective decisions both ways, but understanding can I eat this tariff cost or do I need to pass along to my customer? And if we're having to pass along to customers, it's a challenge because now what I was expecting to sell in the future might not actually occur, because if a competitor doesn't pass along tariff values, now I'm no longer really competing that well on price. My sales are going to drop off and I've compounded a situation. So that's why we want to have as much information as we possibly can. What are our margins going to be with the additional costs with the tariff? Are we okay with that? Do we need to make a price increase? Try and get ahead of all these different situations.
So speaking of situations, I don't really know how to ask this except for it seems really complicated, but I don't want to give the answer to every question as it's complicated. But when I listen to these stories, I mean, literally take the politics out of it, but here's the pain of it. Tariffs are on, they're off. They're on, they got adjusted. What an accounting freaking nightmare. And then now we're starting to talk about paying back tariffs. In other words, you got a tariff of 20% on somebody, and we ran with it for 6 months, and now it got reduced down to 10%. How do you account for that in the accounting side of this, and how does it impact the inventory? I know that's a difficult thing to answer, but I think that's a great question to ask.
So I'll start off by saying I am not an accountant. So always follow proper accounting procedures and recommendations from a CPA. So I've seen work best, and for a number of reasons, is we've generally treated tariff costs as just a bottom line expense, not allocating it to specific items. What we've recommended and what has worked pretty well is trying to recover that cost or accept the fact that it's an additional expense against our margins as we incur it. And we did have one client that was sharpening the pencil, doing as good of a job as they possibly could of identifying what material in their warehouse they paid a tariff on and what they didn't, and only passing along the tariff surcharges when it was material that they'd physically paid a tariff on. Well, that's all well and good right up until the point the tariff gets changed, repealed, whatever. Because like if we read on the news that all tariffs have been repealed this morning, and I send an invoice at noon that has a tariff line on it, people are going to throw a fit. They're like, no, tariffs have been repealed. I'm not paying it anymore. So if we're in the point where tariffs are jumping up and down, I would just try and keep a bottom line, just running tally of what we've paid, what we've brought back in, things like that. If tariffs money gets refunded, brought back, things that are way above my pay grade, number always, I'd view it as essentially a tax return in a lot of cases. It was money that was out the door, interest-free loan, comes back to me. It feels like income. It's really not, but I would recommend not trying to get too cute with adjusting it. I would account for it. I'd track it, make sure overall we're healthy with it. And if some of it comes back to us, absolutely great. But if it doesn't, such is life.
Yeah, one reason I asked that question, I'll get away from this in a second, but I was going to tell you what stimulated or compelled it. You know, I don't remember what podcast it was. We were talking a little bit about inventory, and it was more getting around tariffs where you purchase something, I'm going to say hypothetically, in August, it had a tariff on it. You turn around and now just picture that as it has a little tag tariff on it. You turn around that product in December, but the tariff went down in October. Does the tariff apply to that product that actually goes out the door that had a tariff on it, or does it not apply with the tariff because of when it was purchased?
Yeah, that's the difficulty. And that's why I'm like, we spent this much on tariff in August. We spent this much in tariff in September. What we sold. Are we okay with our running tariff value versus everything else? I mean, it's a different discussion, but very similar to price increases and stuff like that. It's like, well, we paid this for it. It's now worth that. So that's all well and good. The cash out the door was the same regardless. Are our margins okay? Are we happy with the way things are?
All right, I'll move us on to something easier to talk. I bring that because the art are complicated in supply chain, especially when it comes to tariffs and inventory. Go ahead.
It's a gigantic headache. It's very complicated. It's a very nuanced discussion. So it is challenging.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on versus automated in general and speaking. What processes do you still see being done manually inside your client's operations that genuinely surprise you?
It's kind of a categorical surprise. I'm not surprised by the individual actions anymore because I've seen it a lot. The amount of organizations that do all purchasing manually. It's impressive. And a lot of it boils down to they don't trust what's coming out of a computer system. They touched the stove, they got burned with it, they don't like it, they're doing everything by hand. In some cases, it's literal pencil and paper. One of our clients, gigantic, they literally print off hundreds of pages of recommended purchase orders per day, review it with a pen at home, get in the next morning. And that's the way that they'd operated. And we're trying to build confidence in the system to move them forward. Other key things, a lot of very manual data review, where not using, computers are very, very good at trends, they're very, very good at finding outliers and things like that. A lot of people, their way of reviewing data is line by line by line by line by line. It's incredibly effective, but it takes forever. And there are probably better ways of people spending their time.
Maybe a little bit more efficient is the word, right?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. I am trying not to insert my opinion on this because I have two opinions on the question, but I probably will after you answer a little bit. EIM has built proprietary Excel spreadsheets and forecasting tools over the decades. That's incredible intellectual property. But here's the honest question. Where does manual spreadsheet driven work quietly introduce risk, delay, or cost that people don't realize?
Well, it's in the term manual. The EIM process, it is slow. We work in Excel for the most part. We download reports out of an ERP, a computer system, whatever format it might need to be. And we're limited based on the computer processing power of my laptop or someone else's laptop. Generally, if it struggles on mine, it's going to struggle really bad at somebody else's. And it's tedious, but we are able to put in a level of customization that is very easy for us to implement, as that trying to program that into a system is far more difficult. I like to say that EIM spends a lot of our time working on the yeah buts. It's like, we want to handle everything this way except for this and this and this. Oh yeah, and that item over there. The time sink associated with it is a major expense. The other one is human error, copying the wrong thing, pasting it slightly differently, fat fingering a number, all things that are very much people introduced errors into the system. Whereas if the computer's set up properly and the ERP is doing what we want to, we can skip a lot of those, completely eliminate them from the equation. On the other hand, computers are going to do exactly what they're going to do. So the one-off errors might not be there, but we might see more cascading problems just due to automation.
Yeah, so here's where opinion comes in, and it's going to be starkly different than what anybody probably would watch or hear me say, because I own an AI agency. One thing about Excel over the years, especially with good inventory managers, is Excel is awesome. And you replace that awesomeness by just implementing an ERP. And here's why I say that. I have been in and around a lot of inventory managers and analysts that really know Excel, and they basically develop it into their own custom software and inventory management tool. If people really understood and played with and perfected Excel, it really becomes your inventory tool that has intelligence built into it because it's your own customized software. And frankly, as far as like talking to the CPU and the speed, that's easily fixed if you just try, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
You said this, and it goes to the, what I call the OBI days, which was Oracle Business Intelligence, when so often we were able to go out and run all these projects with IT and it looked better, but it took us 6 to 8 months to get there. When, if Daniel's listening, it'll be interesting. Daniel Callender and Raul Posada were involved in all that. They loved it, but they took their Excel spreadsheet over here. They tied it to the database. They manipulated all that shit in like a week or two for what we tried to get an army of freaking IT people together with. Basically hook it to a database, create some objects. And 9 months later, me as the project manager was like, yay, we made it. And they were like, dude, we've been running this over here for like the last, since the second week, because they built it in a very inventory, really a customized software basis. And it freaking worked awesome.
That's essentially our entire business model. A lot of times we start with what's initially coming out of the system. We'll put what I like to refer to as the number nerd solutions. Like, here's what we'd see your industry doing normally. What do you disagree with? And then we start implementing those changes. And Excel is incredibly flexible that way. And you're right. Once we align everything, adjust the tools, adjust the system so it behaves the way we want to, it does go pretty quick. Not quite as fast as an ERP where I just hit enter and it's done, but pretty quick. Some adjustments that we've made are managing inventory, not necessarily at the SKU or the individual item level, but maybe a master item or a replenished value level, where these 3 items are essentially interchangeable. So I don't care exactly how much of each individual one I'm going to need in the future. I care about the higher level, plan at that level, and then figure out how to get that back into the ERP to actually place an order, because I can't order a generic pen. I have to order the specific SKU, but it's with the thought of I'm covering my bases with these 3 SKUs for one specific need. Other situations where if we are dealing with some limited capabilities within an ERP, one group that we were working with, they sold PPE gear in the Montana area where seasonality is a huge thing. They had no seasonality flag or no way to identify a seasonal item in their system. So we said, all right, if I see the word summer or winter, any product description about the item, it's now a seasonal item. And we implemented new rules accordingly on that.
What's PPE?
Very quick for us to do. PPE,
What's
personal protective equipment.
All right, I thought
Sorry.
you said P. Oh, you're fine. I was like, huh?
Yep.
Okay.
High visibility vests,
Yeah.
coats and those kind of things.
Got it. Anyway, so I didn't mean to totally opinionize that, but I
It's
am
fine.
still a huge fan of Excel because I've seen it do some great stuff with it. I'm also involved in many projects where, you get durations out 6 months to 24 months, and the delivery time is just crazy stupid. And we're dropping anywhere from about 400,000 to about 2 million on these projects. We're in the minutia so long that we forgot why we're even there.
It certainly happened.
I'm dead serious. And that's why I say the Excel approach is so good in so many cases. And I'm talking the majority of cases. I'm going to flip it to the other side. When I started the AI agency, and got around a bunch of AI people, it started making me realize how archaic or legacy a SaaS model is and big ERPs are, because we get in our heads that we're going to do this ERP. They spend millions of dollars on it, or let's just call it $500,000. I don't care. And they think that that model is going to hold for 2 to 5 years on that ROI, that depreciation schedule, etc. And in reality, by the time you implement something that big, your business has evolved 2 and 3x. One reason why is because we constantly have all these disruptions. And the second one is where do we always go when the ERP fails? Dude, just give me an export. I'll figure it out in Excel, and then we're going to make an adjustment, and then we're going to go talk to the IT people, and they're going to give us 6 months to a year to fix that. And then we're like, F that, just go figure it out in Excel and get the invoices moving again and go order some damn inventory. Is that pretty much how that plays out?
A lot of times, yeah. And I mean, depending on the size of the firm, an ERP investment is a huge, huge expense, and they don't have the desire or really ability to constantly evolve it. So they just put Scotch tape solutions on things, and that's how you wind up doing the incredibly manual ordering with everything. A lot of times it's called swag, simple wild guessing, forecasting, which is absolutely, our company tries to keep things PG. And in my opinion, there's no better forecasting process than being intimately familiar with everything that you're selling, reviewing usage history and going, I'm going to buy 30. Well, it goes back to the talent versus system discussion that we kind of started with, where that works absolutely great, but it takes a long time to develop that kind of familiarity, that kind of expertise with your inventory. And eventually Joe's going to retire. And if Joe's going to retire and the entirety of your knowledge base walks out the door with him, you're in a big world of hurt when it comes to buying material from then on. And it's happened before. John and I have gotten phone calls. They're like, Steve quit. I'm like, okay. Well, Steve was a good guy. I'm like, yeah, who do we buy this from? I'm like, I know who you bought it 6 years ago. I don't know who you're buying it from now.
Yeah. Before we leave this, there's one thing that I think gets lost in the AI, and I'm going to coin the phrase HI for the hell of it, human intelligence. Seriously, one thing that I've found is with in the AI discussion, people keep thinking AI is the end all solution. And if you've been in these projects, you realize it's not. What I continuously see in the last 2 years, because of the tools like Claude and Gemini that are out there, are when you dovetail it with, for instance, Excel, it puts so much power in the business user and starts not getting rid of, but it puts so much of the heavy weight off of IT so the business can go out and operate like super tactically, quickly, and be able to manipulate the data they want in mass and make sense of it. And why am I saying that is I think people really have to understand AI dovetailed with Excel and the business users starting to use the AI tools with both of them is where the real leverage is. If they would just business people would go out and start just diving into this, because these AI tools are freaking easy. And I'll tell you, I use Claude a shit ton, and I just ask it wild stuff. Like I just developed 3 websites that are highly intricate, many different APIs. Did it all over the weekend. I mean, anybody can go look at the URLs if they want, and you can see how it can be done. And I'm not a coder. I haven't developed anything since the late 90s to actually code. All I'm doing is telling Claude what to do. So my point there, and we'll get away from this, is if business users would just start going out and using Claude or Gemini, you can make some crazy AI stuff super quick. And then dovetail that with the L and your human freaking intelligence, you'll be rolling in a few hours. Anyways, all right. I'll get off the pulp.
No, I completely agree. It's incredibly good at the mundane, the challenging, the difficult, report writing and things like that. But you do need the hands-on. Okay, I've got all this now. What do I do with it? And that's where the human interaction really still needs to be there, in my opinion.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, moving on. Leading cross-functional teams and clients. All right, I got it here, but we'll work with it. What's the hardest part of what you do right now? The people, the data, the systems, or the pace of change?
Probably the people. And I mean, it's not a huge problem because we work with all kinds of different systems. We're very familiar with most of them. The ones we aren't familiar with, we can kind of figure out pretty well. We talk to system companies all the time. It's like, here's what we need to do. And they're like, yeah, generally uploading what we need to get it to work the way we want, not a problem. The people standpoint is, in most cases, the hindrance. And it can come in a bunch of different versions, whether it be just interdiscipline squabbles within the company where sales and purchasing can't be in the same room with sharp implements because they're just going to start screaming at each other. There being just challenges with just the culture within how things operate. Certain salespeople notorious for hiding material because you can certainly do that in an ERP. It's not hard. I'm not going to tell anybody how to do it, but it's not hard. So where that they're hoarding material so that their customers are taken care of, and I don't care about anybody else. And then there are some people that are just incredibly resistant to change. This is the way I've always done it. This is the way I'm going to continue to always do it. And that we just have to build confidence in when we come in. And it is fun. And yeah, fun. I hear from some people, it's like, yeah, when we first started working with each other, I wanted nothing to do with any of this. But now I realized a lot of those headaches are gone. So thank you. I mean, that means a lot, to be honest. So yeah, most of the time it's people, challenges internally, externally, and so on. Systems can get in the way, but we'll figure out how to deal with that. Yeah, so it's normally just personal relationship challenges.
Dude, I thought you so much were going to say the pace of change.
Well, that can certainly be it too, and that goes to not keeping up, and it can be a personnel thing as well, because the business constantly changing, our systems aren't adaptive enough to it, so now we're constantly having to go in, manually update everything, make changes that way. Stuff gets slowed down. Now there's more bickering within the organization. So the tool wasn't set up right because it's not adaptive enough to the way things are working, which leads to interpersonal challenges, which leads to we have to come in and make big changes to the process. So it can certainly happen that way. It all has to be kind of solved together, I guess would be one way of putting it.
You didn't have to have that follow-up just to make me feel good. Because I'm idiot betting.
I'm not a gambler at all either.
Yeah, there we go. Technology adoption. Really, it's no hype, or right now we're in just the hype, right? When you look at AI and automation in the image exploratory space, where does it actually make sense to start? Not the hype, just a real good starting point for AI.
Right now, it's kind of what you're talking about. Building those custom queries, those custom searches, those help me find the information I need to make a decision without having to know how to code, without having to know how to go in and physically manipulate the system, the process, and everything like that. You're right. We're in the middle of hype when it comes to a lot of these things. With that comes a lot of promises. So groups that are over promising on what AI can deliver are the ones that we're seeing kind of struggle in a lot of cases.
This is a gut thing that I continue to watch about AI because I get into these discovery sessions and it always gets stimulated by a C-level person. And you already know my stance on things like what this podcast is about. It's down to earth operator, not vanity talk. I think one of the biggest hindrances with AI right now is people are just exhausted with change. And what I mean by that, they're just exhausted with, so you want me to go start playing with that with no direction, and then you're going to switch direction when you went on somebody else's podcast and started talking about that. And now you want me to go play with that. Do you see that a lot with when you engage customers that you're just like, dude, I just want to go home at 5 o'clock?
Yeah. And, when I was in the Navy, we called it, being a squirrel, where you just go left and right and left and right, and eventually you get run over by a truck. And yeah, and there is, especially I've seen it from the C-suite sometimes, or if it's a privately held company, the guy's last name on his shirt matches the one on the side of the building. They get excited, and there's FOMO associated with, well, we got to be doing something with AI, and I saw this, so we're going to go ahead and do that. And the times that it's most chaotic that I've seen it is when it's truly, we have a solution in search of a problem. We need this, so let's implement it, without really regarding to what's the end goal, where are we trying to wind up with this when it is. And that can be very exhausting for a team when they're like, I've been told we're going to use this new thing. Okay, how?
And why?
Yeah, and why? And it's not just AI, it's a lot of new technologies. Like we were talking about warehouses, implementing barcoding can be very, very effective, but it has to be well thought out. And if you want to demotivate a lot of people, try and force something onto them in a hurry that they're not prepared for. And then it's seriously, people are just waiting for 5 o'clock to hit so they can leave.
Yeah. And I taught, well, I guess I'm 55 years old and been in tech for almost 30 years. And if there's one thing that I've learned, especially on the business side, I can subtly talk about business people starting to use tools and dig in and get excited about something, or don't get excited, just make your life easier. AI has brought that to the table. But often, again, what I see from the operator level, analyst level, they're just exhausted. They really are. And I think that's the bigger thing that the C-suite has to start realizing and how to deal with it. And don't just give them something else to do, or don't try to take them to some team building activity so they'll start using Claude. But I can't really answer for what's the best thing to do there, but just realize that that's there. I mean to take a shot at the C-suite too much more, but I just see what the reality of what goes on the ground. Let's move us towards the dream state, a more grounded area, I guess. Or is it even grounded? If you could wave a magic wand and remove one operational constraint for your clients tomorrow, what would it be?
Operational constraint. Well, most of the people I deal with on a day in, day out, buyers and things like that. And I don't know if it would necessarily be an operational constraint that they have, but truly understanding why things are happening the way they are. So I don't know if I'm exactly answering your question, but that seems to be the biggest day in, day out frustration that my clients deal with their system. It's like, it does this, it's not right. No one can explain to me why it's not working. Or we expected this to happen, that's happening. What's going on? From a larger business standpoint, operational constraint, a lot of times it's the chaos that we're dealing with right now. And I don't know of a magic button to solve some of that, because every time we buy something, there's a chance we're not going to sell it for what we want to. And it's a big problem at this point. So I know that was kind of a cop-out answer.
Not really. But it's a very open. I design these questions a lot of time to create thought. It might be a thought experience, whatever it is, because there's problem within cross-functional teams or teams in general, and especially or specifically in and around inventory management, that I create those kind of questions to create the discussion. The other one is what Tom Burlett and I talk about this on a weekly podcast, and it is the constant disruptions. And people might want to complain about tariffs, but I could go back and string together at least once or twice per year where businesses are faced with big disruptions continuously. And couple that with change, there's your operation. Right. We never can relax, right? And that's why I create that, because we're complaining about tariffs in a war right now. I mean, I can go back through all kinds of stuff over the last 10 years, well before uh, COVID, where everybody thinks it all started. We've had these problems for years, right? That caused operational.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, John and I do lectures at trade shows and things like that. And one of the more common one is, dealing with inventory in a chaotic world. And we just kind of fill in the blank on what the current chaos is and how to deal with it. And you're right. Just disruptions cause problems. And it felt like after the logistics anarchy of COVID, everybody was kind of sitting around waiting for the next shoe to drop, and then like 5 more dropped. It's a huge challenge. I don't know of a way to solve any of it. We just have to figure out how to make the best of the situation in a lot of cases.
You just have to have a lot of grit and keep grinding, as I tell the teams I work with, because
A lot of times, yeah.
And it is, if you're a consultant, you just keep billing and keep working through it. Or if you're an employee, man, that's some guaranteed employment, because disruption, you're always going to have a job, and you're going to keep that job if you keep smiling and you have a good attitude and you keep trying. It's the ones that don't, that get the reputation, may not have a job tomorrow. Anyways, last thing on Dream State. You took the helm, I think, in the last year. Was it the last year?
Yeah, I think
remember.
officially August 1st, but John is still very much a part of everything.
Yeah. So the company is 45 years old, 3,000. You've worked with over 3,000 companies. What do you want to do with EIM over the next 5 years?
Like any organization, we want to grow. But for the most part, we want to continue to nurture good relationships with our clients, continue to offer those custom solutions for things that aren't available within an ERP right now, continue to help our clients get the most out of their inventory investment. We have a very personal touch with everybody we talk to. We don't outsource we don't outsource anything for the most part. Everybody you deal with in an organization shares a last name. So we're looking to grow. We're looking to continue to engage, but we still want to have that very, hands-on approach to everybody that we deal with.
That was awesome. Really appreciate the insight. Before we wrap up, anything you feel the industry isn't talking about correctly, or any insights that you can give us?
I mean, the biggest thing, and it's all over our book, is really understanding the total cost of inventory. John likes to say that gross margin is the worst metric ever introduced because it has no bearing on true profitability, because it doesn't account for how much inventory we have. So we prefer something referred to as adjusted margin, where we're factoring in the cost of keeping material in our warehouse. And we need to make sure that that's healthy and that we're doing well with that, because I've seen it time and time again. Gross margin 30, 40, 50%, but you're sitting on 6 years worth of material. So really you're losing money on some of your fastest moving and best moving material. And so one thing, understand your adjusted margin.
See, right there, a very interesting conversation. A lot of people think inventory can't be interesting. I always find it interesting. It's just who you got at the table.
Very true. It's interesting. If it gets exciting, that means something's going wrong, but it's interesting.
Oh my gosh, that's a good way of putting it. It's always interesting. And if it is exciting, there's a big bleeping problem, right? Right. Well put. All right, I love that. This was generally value packed into the audience. If you're still here this late, if you can, give us a thumbs up, maybe a subscription, if you will. It doesn't cost you anything. And Matt, I really appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
You're listening to Supply Chain Unlocked. Get exclusive insights from industry leaders on overcoming challenges,